students of Reddit, what's your well that happened moment in the classroom? No longer a student, but when I was a freshman in high school there was this guy I knew since middle school who would always get into trouble. Well, one day he told our math teacher that he needed to go to the restroom. Already familiar with his behavior and using the restroom excuse to ditch class, she refused to let him go. He insisted that he had to go, but she refused yet again. Minutes passed and told the teacher that if she didn't let him use the restroom that he was going to piss on the trash can. Trying to call his bluff, she told him go for it on the trash can. Some of the students didn't think he'd do it and egged him on to do it. He got up from his desk and approached the trash can, which was at the corner right next to the classroom door. He was in the corner for a minute. Then he actually peed in the trash can. The teacher just sat there as it happened, nonchalant like. I can't remember if he left the class after he pulled it off since it was years ago. But yeah, it cracks me up thinking about that moment. A bonus I should add about the guy. My best friend knew him as well and were even good friends. He once told me that during our sophomore year the guy got expelled for breaking the door window of the security office. They chased him and caught up to him at a nearby mall. In the largest lecture hall on campus, there's a large reproduction of George Washington crossing the Delaware hanging above a door. One afternoon during my class in said room, some guy dressed entirely in red, white, and blue with an eagle mask walked in, saluted the painting and exited. 11th grade AP Bio class. One of my classmates was locally renowned for his nonsense. One day he decided he was gonna leave, and so he walked to the back of the classroom and hopped out the first story window and left. In the middle of class. Same guy. Same class brought his banjo in one day and had a banjo jam session before class started. Okay, so this happened a while ago, so I might not have all the details. So I was on the school bus and we weren't allowed to eat on the bus. So the kids behind me were talking about lunch tomorrow and one of them said, yeah, I can bring bacon. I was hungry, so I said, bacon? Who's bringing bacon? The bus driver overheard me, but didn't know it was me. Stopped the bus and yelled, bacon? Who has bacon? Then he walked down the aisle and looked to see who has bacon. It was so funny. But you kinda had to be there. I remember being maybe in 2nd grade and this one kid in our class kept yelling "shti" through the window at some 10th 11th grader that was outside. Our window was easy to climb in and out of as it wasn't placed at a higher level from the ground. The dude that was standing outside got annoyed with him, I guess, and just jumped on the window stool, which was pretty wide, and said something along the lines of, "You kid should not be saying things like this. I'm older and won't do anything, but someone in this life will at some point if you keep this behavior." Then went back to his friends or whatever like nothing out of the ordinary happened. Our whole class of 2nd graders was shocked. I know it would have been more interesting if I remembered the details, but it happened a long time ago. I went to a small college and our classroom sizes were very small, 15 or 25 people, so we got to know everyone pretty well. There was this one guy who came in so stoned that he fell off his chair. Thankfully the prof was relatively chill, so she let him go home. Not my story, but my friend told me how on the first day of class, during introductions and icebreakers, this girl got up and ran toward the door. She didn't make it and threw up all over the place. Looked around her and completely horrified left the class. She came back for her stuff later. Also, another time, my professor knew I was turning 21 the night before, and when I came in the next morning, completely hungover and dead, he and the whole class applauded me. It was nice. Fat kid comes into science class in the morning not looking too good. Substitute teacher doesn't care even when we tell her that he is literally going blue. Eventually he throws up on the floor and the teacher goes to him to help. He covers his mouth with his coat so he doesn't throw up on her. He throws up and his vomit goes down his jacket sleeve and gets dumped on her shoes. Substitute teacher walks out of schools with a trail of vomit footprints and says nothing. Freshman year of college. I had one professor who would randomly call on students in class, and if they didn't answer correctly, he would proceed to give them a roast in front of the whole class for their lack of knowledge on the subject material. I was in the class with a few of my good friends, as it was a prerequisite that we all needed to have. Even though we got our fair share of roasting from him as well. We all thought it was funny, and knew it was his way of making sure the students are engaged in the lecture. About halfway through the semester, he called on one person, and after she incorrectly answered, he started to casually roast a student. At this point, another girl raised her hand to get the prof's attention. After he called on her, she proceeded to vocally berate him about how he was treating us all like children, as well as call him every vulgar word she could think of. At this point, he's shouting back at her too, complete with all the same vulgarities that she used on him. And me and my friends are just sitting in the back, laughing under our breath while simultaneously being completely dumbfounded that this kind of stuff actually happens in college. Finally, he yells at her to leave lecture. She obliges, and as soon as she is out of the room, he proceeds to roast her even more to the class. It was so odd to see something like this, especially since I had just come from high school a few months before. Man, college is wild. 9th grade for reference. Everyone was being super loud, so we were pretty much unable to discern anything short of our own table. Just as the teacher is coming in and everyone is quieting down, this one kid is just loudly talking and telling this one girl who looks really fking uncomfortable it's 4 inches with the most proud voice ever. Not a student anymore, but we had a supply English teacher that had the good old habit of liking a little drink in the classroom. He used to pull a small bottle of vodka out of the drawer and take a small sip every few minutes while trying to be sly about it. Well, after a while one of the students told a teacher about it, and then the supply teacher was found on his lunch break watching Netflix and drinking a glass of wine in the classroom. Funny thing is, he stayed on as a teacher for another 3 months before being totally kicked out for a similar thing. I was in a college class last semester. I'm in my early 30s, so I definitely wasn't the youngest student, but I wasn't the oldest either. There was a guy in his 60s in the class too. All semester he was super serious and studious. He always did like thrice the amount of work expected. He wrote a 15-page report when all that was expected was like 5. Finals rolls around and during the test our professor steps out of the class for a minute. As soon as she's gone, old dude gets up and starts asking people for answers on the test. It's always the person you least expect. And X200B. TL. DR. Old people cheat on tests too. This wasn't my class but was the talk of the school for a while. A well-liked teacher gave her class a free work day and offered to play some music. Upon opening her iTunes, she found a file named Transformers MP4. Curious, she opened it. It turned out to be hardcore porn that blasted through the entire class at full volume. Panicking, she couldn't figure out how to shut it off, so she ran the laptop open and still blasting at full volume down the hallway to the office to reduce exposure to students. It turns out, the superintendent's son used one of the shared servers to browse and download the video so it was accessible by every computer connected to the school network. The superintendent resigned a couple years later. Had a teacher have a little bit of a mental meltdown in class when she realized that no one really cared about doing the homework and such. She was really sad, and I wish I was a better student for her. And I hope her life is going better nowadays. I saw this too. It was my grade 9 French teacher and the class was full of shitty-heads that never paid attention, never did their work and constantly ragged on her for being overweight. One day she absolutely lost it. Took off her shoes and threw them at the class like ninja stars, then started throwing desks and chairs. Everyone just stared in stunned silence. She walked out of the class and left us all there and took the rest of the semester off. I always felt awful for her because she was a very sweet lady and I always made sure to be on my best behavior for her because I could tell how much the kids in that class were getting to her. A physics class in community college. Professor was explaining conservation of angular momentum and had a kid sit on a tall chair that spins. He then had the kid hold 2 books out with extended arms and then spin as fast as he can before telling the kid to pull the books in close to his chest. Think of a figure skater and how they spin really fast. Close bracket. The kid immediately turns into a blur and the stool chair starts to tip slightly until it rockets from under him like it was shot from a slingshot. The kid slams into the floor as if he got choke slammed and his head hit the floor in a way that sounded like someone dropped an overly ripe melon. The look on the professor's face said, "Well, that was a good run. I guess I have to find a new career now." Double quote. Kid turned out okay and everyone got a laugh, but it genuinely looked like I had just witnessed a death. In high school physics, we were waiting for the teacher to show up. And another physics teacher from another class comes in with a bowling ball and says, "Do you guys think I can dribble this?" Everyone just kinda looks at him incredulously. And he begins to repeatedly and heavily strong arm the bowling ball into the floor hard enough for it to rebound high enough that he can keep the momentum going. People start to laugh. But then after about 5 or 6 bounces, the ball splits in half as it hits the floor. He quickly scoops up the halves, holds a conspiratorial finger to his lips, and shuffles out the door. And X200B. About 15 seconds later, our physics teacher comes in, looks at the few dusty chips of bowling ball on the floor, and asks, "What was all that noise? What's this mess on the floor?" Double quote. When I was in college, I was sitting in a geology lecture center when someone dressed in a banana costume crashes in, does a lap around the room, then gets chased out of the room by a guy in a gorilla suit who came in after him. Last year we had an assembly in the auditorium. They started it off paying tribute to a shooting that happened earlier that day, don't remember which one. Guy working the computer was still setting things up. The speaker says, "As you may know, there was a shooting earlier today." Guy on computer messes up at just the right time. Plays applause sound effect. One time, in high school, I had a history teacher who would get pissed and yell at us when no one would listen, understandably so. Anyways, I guess one day he cracked and picked up an empty desk from the side of the classroom and threw it across the room, narrowly missing one of the most annoying students. Then he yelled, "Fuck this." I quit and stomped out. He never came back. We all just kinda sat there for a good minute before one of the goody two-shoe kids went to the office to tell the principal what happened. Second week of our first term. First year at uni, so no one really knew each other that well. We were in a child language acquisition class and our lecturer was telling us how she was half German, so was fluent in both German and English. A Latvian guy, maybe 25, who was a bit strange anyway, on my table then for no apparent reason just shouted "Sire Sieg Heil." Cue silence. Pin dropping silence. Cue awkward looks to each other. Our lecturer then started asking, "What did he say?" He said nothing. She asked again and asked why would he say that? He started going red and mumbled something like it was funny. Our lecturer then started getting angry and took her cardigan off and started shouting at him. Does he know what that means? He admitted no. He thought it was a greeting. Our lecturer asked anyone in the class if they could explain why what he just said was so offensive. Thankfully my friend came to the rescue and asked if we could just move on. The guy then googled Sieg Heil and a look of horror appeared on his face. He genuinely assumed it was just a German greeting. One of my classmates, 15 years old, was built like a brick shithouse. Our art teacher, super cool guy, wanted the kid to demonstrate how solidly built he was. With the kid's permission, he was gonna give him a hard shove to see how hard it would be to knock him over. Well, it definitely didn't go according to plan. They both assumed their positions. Student had his arms crossed standing right in front of the teacher. Then the art teacher gave him a huge shove. No joke. My classmate flew backwards and knocked over a chair before landing with a thud and sliding a bit further. It was like something out of an anime fight scene. The silence was awful. The teacher thought he was gonna get fired over this. He obviously figured the student wouldn't go down that easy. The student was beated. Embarrassed as all hell. The rest of the class didn't believe what just went down. After the teacher apologized a million times, we all agreed not to mention this to other teachers. Still one of my favorite teachers. Girl in English class faints and students rush over to see if she's okay. The teacher tells students to get a chair and prop her up on it. The teacher sends someone down to the office to get a teacher phone for help. Teacher carries on reading out poems that we should be studying. Anyway, the girl ends up having an epileptic fit and everyone kinda freaks out. The teacher gets mad that no one is listening to her read the poems and tells everyone to sit back down, help will come at some stage. Girl gets rushed to the hospital. She turned out okay. Teachers took a few days off though. In 6th grade I witnessed what was probably the end of a substitute's career. One of my classmates showed up about an hour or so late after deciding he wanted to color his hair pink. For whatever reason he decided the best way to go about this was to dip his head in pink paint. The sub told him to go wash his hair out immediately in the bathroom. But he wasn't having any of that. After several minutes of them arguing back and forth, she walked over and grabbed him by the hair and slammed his face into his desk. As soon as she let go of him, he ran out the door and to his home across the street. The sub just sat in the corner sobbing until the principal came and escorted her out. Not too proud of this moment. Back in 8th grade, my teacher had this intelligence quiz. I vividly remember that one of the questions asked on the quiz was, what do these 3 inventions have in common? The fire extinguisher, body armor, and fire alarm. I, in my prime edgelord years, wrote down a very simple answer. They don't work. Going through the answers, the teacher revealed that the answer to the question was that they were all invented by women. Don't know if that's true, to which I, in my brilliance, decided to blurt out, that's why they don't work. The look of disappointment and hushed giggles haunt me to this day. Teacher made a masturbation joke. This isn't uncommon. He makes many dirty jokes, but as teens none of us care and frankly find them hilarious. Whilst we had a year 7 in the class doing a test, he forgot she was in there and immediately panicked and started apologizing to her. Don't think she really cared either. Still felt sorry for her though. The same teacher also blew up 3 plastic bottles. 2 he expanded with heat from a Bunsen burner until they burst and melted. The second he used a bicycle pump to send another bottle up into the air like a rocket. He almost broke the ceiling. He ended up getting the bicycle pump confiscated by the lab technician. This guy sat in the middle of the class, always was on his phone and never took notes. Well, the first exam came around and he opened it up, looked down and yelled, shit, this isn't bio. Got up to leave and never came back. The class was the final management class for business majors. This was in my anthropology class my freshman year about 7 years ago. We had just watched a video about the schooling system in Japan. In some of the clips, the school children had name tags on their shirts. After the video ended, the professor asked if there were any questions. This guy who sat next to me, who, by the way, was always late and usually smelled strongly of weed, raised his hand and asked, so, like, do the little Japanese kids have to wear name tags because you can't tell them apart? Double quote. As it turns out, the professor's wife is Japanese, and his children half Japanese. I was in 5th grade and we had a lockdown because of a suspicious person on campus. Since we were 5th graders, everyone freaked out and basically dove under the desks. Except for 3 kids who were just in the middle of the classroom, on beanbags, being loud as shit and playing 007. Not really a classroom, but one day after pay me and my friends were changing out into our regular clothes when suddenly we hear a commotion in the restroom. Our section of lockers had an almost direct view into the restrooms, so we make our way over there to see 2 of the 6 sinks, and they were ripped out of the walls by this one football player. This happened in February, and for the longest time until I graduated, I was a junior at the time, the sinks were still ripped out of the wall. One of the janitors must have gotten lazy because the next time we went into the locker room the sink was haphazardly put back into the wall only to be ripped out again. The guy who did this has major issues, as another friend said. He played gore videos on a classroom projector. Everyone has a school issued laptop, and I saw him chase the freshmen around the team locker room like a spider monkey. Naked. I took creative writing in college. The professor was a super laid back dude who was incredibly passionate about English. Really cool guy. Started the first class by having us listen to Cheap Trick and talking about how words are magical. Then he came up with what he described as what would be either the best or worst idea he had ever had. Every week, it was a night class, so only one 3 hours long class a week, he would bring a different alcoholic beverage for the class. Usually it was wine. Sometimes beer or hard liquor. We would then get drunk and work on our writing project. The class only had one assignment: write a novel. It was the greatest class I've ever been in. This is in a college lecture hall, but it was a large lecture hall but with not too many students. During class we heard female moans. At first we each thought we were hearing things, so nobody responded. 5 minutes later the moans got even louder and we turned around to the source. We thought it was probably someone watching porn who accidentally forgot to plug their headphones in. The dude was knuckles deep fingering the girl sitting next to him. Her short skirt was hiked up. Probably one of the most embarrassing moments of my life right here. It was 7th grade English class and my crush and the first girl I ever made out with was in the class. I don't remember if we kissed before or after this happened. Maybe after? Anyway, I let one rip. Silent but deadly, literally by definition. It smelled so bad that the kids around me started freaking out and obviously my whole body is turning red. It caused such a distraction in the class from people laughing that the teacher made me go in the hall while the stench dissipated. After 5 minutes I was allowed back in and had to perform the walk of shame past my crush back to my desk that was drowning in Febreze. The lockdown alarm sounded and we went into lockdown. A little later a man come pounding the doors yelling, "These damn Dairy Queens don't have chicken nuggets. Only strips." I was trying so hard not to laugh. Cause I am weird and laugh when I'm scared or nervous. And eventually the security guard lured him out by saying he'll buy him chicken nuggets from McDonald's. Apparently he didn't have any weapons. And that happened. One of my classmates was bunking class and for some reason decided to call someone who was in class at the time. We're not allowed to use phones in class. Our professor then snatches the phone and begins talking over it. Only to find out who's on the other end. Needless to say, the kid who bunked class was made to come back and attend class. Didn't happen in the classroom, but on the school bus. About 6 or 7 years ago. My brother and I were on the bus home from school. It was double-decker, so I was on the lower deck and my brother was on the top deck. It wasn't a long drive but about 10 minutes and there was a sudden scream from upstairs and then everyone started laughing and shouting. All of us on the lower deck were incredibly confused. We thought maybe someone threw up or smashed their phone. Happened a lot and didn't really think anything of it. My brother later explained what happened to me. Apparently one of the kids in the year below me decided to drop his trousers and pants in front of the entire top deck. Full of kids age 11 years 18 years and shove a half-eaten apple core up his asshole. He's at university now, but still has the nickname Apple Core when he comes back home. It was about the second week of class. In a full auditorium. So probably about 300 people. Professor asks if there are any questions about what he just talked about. Some guy sitting in the middle of the room mutters something about how he doesn't understand a goddamn thing. But he says it loudly enough so that everyone can hear. Including the professor. Prof tries to help him out. Asks him what he's confused about. This kid stands up and starts yelling about how this class is so f***ing stupid. It's a waste of time. Just losing it about this class that we've only been to 3 times so far. Then he grabs his laptop. Breaks it completely in half over his knee. And yells something about how he's going to be a YouTuber anyways and doesn't need this shit. As he's walking out. He goes, "I'm out of here. Who's with me?" Nobody moves a muscle. Except for a guy on the opposite side of the lecture hall who shouts, "Yeah, FCK this shit." And they both storm out together. I have no clue if that was part of some hazing ritual or a bet or what. But nothing like that has ever happened again in any of my classes.